What if the most devastating thing about the Batman, Part 2, isn't the villain? What if it's a quiet conversation between a man and his butler? Andy Serkis just confirmed he's coming back as Alfred Pennyworth. And the word he used to describe this sequel, just one word, should have every DC fan sitting up straight right now. That word? Emotional. Stick with me, because what's happening behind the scenes of this film is far more interesting than anything I've seen reported. And by the end of this video, you're going to see the Batman, Part 2, in a completely different light. Let's start at the beginning. Andy Serkis, motion capture legend, one of the most technically gifted actors alive, recently confirmed in no uncertain terms that he will be returning as Alfred Pennyworth in the Batman, Part 2. Now, on the surface, that sounds like routine casting news. Of course Alfred is coming back. Of course the loyal butler will be there. What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Serkis didn't just confirm his return. He added context. He revealed layers. He said the sequel is going to be, and I'm paraphrasing here, not quoting directly, deeply, profoundly emotional. The kind of emotional that goes beyond action sequences and villain confrontations. Think about what that means from his perspective. Andy Serkis has played some of the most tortured, complex characters in cinema history. Gollum, Caesar in Planet of the Apes, King Kong. This is a man who has stared into the abyss of broken souls and embodied them with terrifying precision. When he uses the word emotional, he doesn't mean a single tear rolling down a cheek during a monologue. He means something that guts you, something that rewires how you feel about these characters. That's not a throwaway comment. That's a promise. And there's something else. Serkis won't be joining production immediately. He has to finish directing the hunt for Gollum first. His return to Middle-earth as a filmmaker. So he'll be joining the Batman, Part 2 later in the year, once that project wraps. He's confirmed he'll be there by the end of the production cycle. What does that tell us about Alfred's role in this story? It tells us Alfred probably doesn't appear in the film's opening act. His arc might be weighted toward the second half of the film, the emotional climax, the revelations, the reckoning. If Alfred were just a background presence, Serkis' delayed arrival wouldn't matter. His scheduling suggests Alfred's scenes are significant, perhaps even pivotal. Here's where it gets interesting from a production standpoint. Filming on the Batman, Part 2, is reportedly set to begin in May. That's soon. That's very soon. And for a film with an October 2027 target release date, that gives Matt Reeves and his team roughly 2.5 years from camera roll to cinemas. Now, the Batman, the first film, had a notoriously difficult production. COVID disrupted everything. Robert Pattinson himself tested positive. The shoot stretched, paused, restarted. The final film clocked in at just under 3 hours. This time, the conditions appear more controlled, more intentional. A May start date signals that the script, written by Matt Reeves alongside Project Power and Blue, I Samurai co-writer Matt and Tomlin, is locked or close to it. You don't call your principal cast back to set without a finished blueprint. This isn't a film being written on the fly. The story is ready. And Matt and Tomlin's involvement is worth pausing on for a second. Tomlin is a writer who understands interiority. He understands what it means to write characters who carry weight silently, who communicate grief through behavior, not exposition. His fingerprints on this script suggest the Batman. Part 2 won't just be a bigger movie. It will be a deeper movie. The October 2027 window is also strategic. DC is playing the long game now under James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU restructuring. The Batman exists in its own separate continuity, the Elseworlds label, which means it doesn't have to compete with or coordinate with Superman or the brave and the bold. It can breathe. It can be its own thing. That's freedom, real creative freedom. And Matt Reeves has earned the right to use it. Let's dig into that word again. Emotional. The first film was already emotionally sophisticated for a superhero movie. It dealt with grief, obsession, identity, and the corrosive mythology of a city that was slowly consuming itself. Bruce Wayne in Matt Reeves' universe isn't triumphant. He's broken. He's a man who inherited tragedy and decided, perhaps wrongly, that becoming a monster in the shadows was the only way to honor it. But Part 2 is set to go further. Reeves has spoken previously about wanting to explore the corruption beneath Gotham's surface. Not just the criminal element, but the institutional rot. The city's founding families. The deals made in darkness that built everything gleaming above. And, at the center of that corruption, the Wayne family. Wait, the Wayne family? Here's where the speculation gets genuinely thrilling. Thomas and Martha Wayne have always been martyrs in Batman mythology. Saints almost. Murdered innocents whose deaths became the fuel for a crusade. But what if the Batman? Part 2 challenges that narrative. What if Bruce discovers that the Wayne legacy, the foundation, the money, the name, is built on something darker than he ever imagined? The first film already planted seeds. Falcone's connection to the Wayne family. Thomas Wayne's desperate deal-making in the final days before his murder. The suggestion that Gotham's elite were never clean. Not even the family that produced its greatest hero. If Part 2 pulls the thread all the way, Bruce Wayne's entire identity collapses. And that is what Serkis means by emotional. Because Alfred is the only person alive who knew Thomas and Martha Wayne personally. Alfred is the living archive of everything Bruce has built his myth upon. If the truth about the Waynes needs to come out, Alfred is the one who has to deliver it. Alfred is the one standing between Bruce's grief and his destruction. That's not a butler scene. That's a crucifixion. Robert Pattinson returns as Bruce Wayne/Batman. That's non-negotiable. His performance in the first film was one of the most genuinely surprising things to happen in superhero cinema in years. Brooding, physical, deeply human beneath the rubber suit. Jeffrey Wright is back as Jim Gordon, which is equally essential. The Gordon-Batman partnership in Reeves' universe is less a bromance and more a mutual survival pact between two men who've chosen to fight a war they're probably going to lose. Colin Farrell's Oz Cobb, the Penguin, has since had his own HBO series to develop and explore. By the time Part 2 arrives, audiences will know this character intimately. He won't need introduction. He can step directly into the film's larger machinery as a fully formed power player. And then there's the question everyone is asking quietly, carefully, try not to jinx it. Barry Keoghan, the Joker. His appearance at the end of the first film, gaunt, feral, barely contained behind prison glass, was one of the most chilling interpretations of the character ever committed to screen. And nothing has been confirmed. Keoghan is unconfirmed for Part 2, but nothing has been denied either. Here's what I believe. If this film is about Gotham's deeper corruption, about the abyss beneath the city's foundations, then you need the character who most perfectly embodies that abyss. The Joker isn't a villain who wants money or power. He's a mirror. He reflects back the rot that was already there. A story about the darkness inside Gotham's most sacred institution, the Wayne family, absolutely has room for Joker to whisper uncomfortable truths from behind bars. Not as the main threat, but as a voice. As the one who sees everything clearly precisely because he's outside the system entirely. The fan community has been spinning theories since the first film ended, and a few of them have aged remarkably well. Theory 1. Thomas Wayne faked his own death. This one circulates every few months. The idea is that the murder of Thomas and Martha Wayne wasn't a random mugging. It was orchestrated. That Thomas, faced with exposure of his dealings with Falcone and the mob, arranged a disappearance. That somewhere, somehow, Thomas Wayne is still alive. This would be the most devastating story Matt Reeves could tell. It would recontextualize everything. Bruce's mission, his pain, his identity, all of it built on a lie. The emotional fallout for Alfred in this scenario? Unimaginable, because Alfred would have known. Alfred always knows. Theory 2. The Riddler's message was bigger than we think. The Riddler targeted Gotham's elite not randomly, but systematically. He had files. He had evidence. Some of that evidence was presented at trial. Some of it wasn't. What didn't make it into the public record? What did the city's establishment successfully suppress? Part 2 could pick up exactly where that thread was cut. Theory 3. Bruce Wayne cannot sustain the Batman. This is less a plot theory and more character one. Pattinson's Bruce is not sustainable. He doesn't eat properly. He doesn't sleep. He is running on grief and adrenaline and the thin fiction that what he's doing is working. Part 2 might be the story where that fiction collapses, where Alfred, emotionally, literally, has to tell Bruce, "You are going to die, and your father would not want this." That conversation, that's the emotional center of the sequel. I'm almost certain of it. Here's what we know for certain. The Batman, Part 2 is coming. It films soon. It arrives in October 2027. It is written by two of the most thoughtful screenwriters working in genre cinema right now. It stars one of the most transformative actors of his generation, and it features, in a role of apparent emotional significance, a man who has spent his entire career making audiences feel things they didn't know they were capable of feeling. Andy Serkis called it emotional, not spectacular, not ambitious, not game-changing, emotional. In a landscape of superhero films that compete on scale, on spectacle, on the sheer volume of their set pieces, The Batman, Part 2 is apparently going to compete on feeling. And that might be the most radical thing a comic book sequel has ever tried to do. Because we don't just watch Batman to see a man punch criminals in the dark. We watch because somewhere in that armored silhouette, we recognize something. A grief we can't name. A duty we invented for ourselves to make sense of our own loss. A compulsive need to fix what can't be fixed, protect what can't be protected, control what refuses to be controlled. Bruce Wayne is all of us when we're at our worst and our most desperate. And Alfred is the voice that refuses to let us die in that darkness alone. The Batman, Part 2 isn't just a superhero movie. It's going to be a reckoning. And I, for one, cannot wait. If this got you thinking, if you're already running theories in your head about the Waynes, about Alfred, about what Matt Reeves has quietly been building toward, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. Hit subscribe if you want to be here when the first trailer drops, because that breakdown is going to be something else entirely. And until then, keep watching the shadows. Because in Gotham, that's where the truth always hides.